The fluorescent lights flickered above the aisles of Jensen's Superstore, a chain grocery store in Atlanta. The hum of the refrigerators and the distant beeping of a checkout scanner filled the air. It was past midnight, and most of the employees had already left for the day, but one woman still remained, pushing a mop across the glossy tile floor, her swollen feet screaming for rest. Her name was Maria Thompson, 32 years old, 7 months pregnant, and still working overtime to keep up with the piling bills. Rent, medical expenses, baby supplies. Her paycheck barely stretched far enough. Every night, she wiped down the shelves, restocked the dairy section, and cleaned the floors, all while carrying the weight of a new life inside her. Her body ached, but she had no choice. The world didn't pause for struggling mothers. As she reached the back of the store, she saw the last few customers leave. A tall man in a hoodie and sweatpants stood near the frozen food section, examining a box of waffles like it held the meaning of life. His face was familiar. Impossibly familiar. Maria squinted and nearly dropped the mop. Big Shaq. Shaquille O'Neal. Her heart pounded. It wasn't every day that an NBA legend walked into Jensen's Superstore. She had seen him on TV, heard about his generosity, how he randomly paid for people's groceries or left huge tips for waiters. But what could she possibly say to him? She was just a store cleaner, an exhausted, struggling mother-to-be. And yet, deep down, a desperate hope burned inside her. Maria hesitated, then made a decision. She grabbed a small piece of receipt paper from her pocket and scribbled a note. Her fingers trembled as she wrote, her heart spilling onto the page. Dear Shaq, I don't know if you'll ever see this, but I don't know who else to turn to. My name is Maria. I'm 7 months pregnant, working every night to keep a roof over my head. I'm scared. I don't know how I'm going to make it. If you ever see this, please, just pray for me. She folded the note and, taking a deep breath, slipped it into the shopping cart he had left near the checkout. Then, without looking back, she continued mopping. Maybe he wouldn't see it. Maybe he would. But at least for a moment, she had let her fears escape onto paper. She finished her shift in silence, her thoughts swirling like a storm. As she clocked out and stepped into the cold night air, she whispered a quiet prayer. She had no idea that her life was about to change forever. Shaquille O'Neal hummed to himself as he strolled through the nearly empty parking lot, a bag of frozen waffles in one hand and his car keys in the other. He had always enjoyed late-night grocery runs. No cameras, no crowds, just a simple trip for snacks. But something felt different tonight. As he reached his SUV, he noticed a crumpled piece of paper at the top of his cart. Curious, he unfolded it. His eyes scanned the words, his expression shifting from amusement to concern. He read it again, slower this time, letting the weight of Maria's message sink in. 7 months pregnant, struggling, scared. It was a simple note, but it carried an ocean of pain. Shaq exhaled deeply, rubbing his chin. He had always been a firm believer in helping people when he could. This wasn't just a fan letter. This was a cry for help. And he wasn't the type to ignore something like that. He turned back toward the store, scanning the area, but Maria was nowhere in sight. He looked around, then spotted an employee near the entrance, a young cashier locking up for the night. "Hey, man," Shaq called out, walking over. "You know a Maria that works here?" The cashier looked up, startled. Yeah, Maria Thompson. She works nights, usually closes up." "Why?" Shaq smiled slightly. She's still here?" The cashier shook his head. "Nah, she just left a few minutes ago, probably walking home. She doesn't have a car." Shaq's chest tightened. A pregnant woman walking alone at this hour? That didn't sit right with him. "Which way does she go?" he asked, already moving toward his car. The cashier pointed toward a dimly lit street that stretched away from the store. "That way. She takes the bus sometimes, but I think she just walks when she misses it." Shaq didn't wait to hear more. He climbed into his SUV, started the engine, and rolled out of the parking lot, his eyes scanning the sidewalk. A few blocks down, he spotted her. A small figure in a heavy coat, arms wrapped around her stomach as she trudged along the cracked pavement. He pulled up beside her, rolling down his window. "Maria!" She froze, turning slowly. Her eyes widened as she recognized him, and for a moment, she just stood there, stunned. "Hop in," Shaq said gently. "Let me take you home." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't alone. Maria sat in Shaq's SUV, her hands resting protectively on her belly. The warmth of the car was a welcome relief from the biting night air, but she still felt uneasy. She had never expected anything to come from that note, much less Shaquille O'Neal himself pulling up beside her on the street. It felt unreal. "Where to?" Shaq asked, his deep voice kind but firm. Maria hesitated before giving him the address of her small apartment on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't much, just a cramped one-bedroom with peeling paint and a leaky faucet. But it was home, for now, at least. As they drove, Shaq glanced at her. "So, tell me your story." She exhaled slowly. "Not much to tell. Just trying to get by. The baby wasn't exactly planned, and the father, well, he's not in the picture." Shaq nodded, his expression unreadable. "You got family around?" "Not really," she admitted. "Just me and this little one." A silence settled between them, thick with unspoken struggles. Then Shaq spoke. "You need help, and I don't just mean a ride home." Maria's breath caught in her throat. I don't want to be a charity case." "Nah, it's not about that," Shaq said. "It's about doing the right thing. Look, I got connections. I can set you up with a better job, maybe help with the baby. Whatever you need, just say the word." Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she wiped them away quickly. "Why would you do that for me?" Shaq smiled. "Because someone once helped my mom when she needed it most, and now it's my turn to pay it forward." For the first time in months, Maria felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things were about to change. Maria woke up the next morning feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The events of the previous night still felt like a dream. But as she glanced at the small slip of paper Shaq had given her with a phone number and an address, she knew it was real. He had promised to help, and for once, she wanted to believe that things could get better. She took a deep breath, got dressed, and prepared for the next step in her journey.